Our story begins in the middle of June 1798. The news of an arrival of a British fleet under the command of Horatio Nelson off the coast of Alexandria had reached the locals. Nelson was tasked with finding a French fleet that was reported to be en route to Egypt. This French fleet was commanded by none other than Napoleon Bonaparte, who had set his sights on the conquest of Egypt. Egypt, by this time, was under the control of the Ottoman Empire, which they had conquered from the Mamluks 300 years prior. However, the reign of the Mamluks did not end after the Ottoman conquest. The Mamluks stayed as the ruling elite with the support of the local scholars and the merchants, while the vast majority of the local populace consisted of peasants and artisans who had little influence in the affairs of the region and were merely viewed as taxpayers. The English had informed the locals that their enemy, the French, had apparently set sail from Malta and were en route to Egypt, and warned them of the possibility of a French attack. These warnings fell on deaf ears, and the English were expelled. A few days later, the words of the English came true. French ships were spotted off the coast of Alexandria, and as soon as they made landfall, they attacked the city. The outnumbered and unprepared garrison did not put up much of a fight and surrendered shortly after. Napoleon's goal was simple: subjugate Egypt and advance to the Levant, with the aim of establishing a French foothold in the Near East that could threaten the British interests in India. Alexandria was lost, and the news quickly reached Cairo. There, the two Mamluk co-rulers of Egypt, Murad Bey and Ibrahim Bey, convened a council with the emirs and scholars to assess the situation. The meeting was met with arguments. As was usual with the Mamluks, factions usually rose among them and they squabbled. One of them had said, "All of this is a result of negligence in managing the ports and letting things slide." Another had responded, "What can we do? For whenever we want to rebuild and fortify, you say, they plan to rebel against the Sultan." Shortly after, a report was sent to Constantinople, and the council agreed to prepare their forces against the French, with Murad Bey as the commander. Meanwhile, the French army was already on the move and had just taken the town of Rosetta, and there Napoleon issued a flyer to be read and distributed throughout all of Egypt. It read, "On behalf of the French Republic, which is based upon the foundation of liberty and equality, General Bonaparte, Commander-in-Chief of the French armies, makes known to all the Egyptian people that for a long time the Sanjaks who lorded over Egypt have treated the French community basely and contemptuously, and have persecuted its merchants with all manner of extortion and violence. Therefore, the hour of punishment has now come. O ye Egyptians, they may say to you that I have not made an expedition hither for any other object than that of abolishing your religion. But this is a pure falsehood, and you must not give credit to it. Tell your nation that the French are also faithful Muslims, who invaded Rome and destroyed there the Papal See." The flyer was designed to pacify the Muslim population and sow the seeds of discontent amongst their Mamluk and Ottoman rulers. It continued with naming the following conditions. 1. Submit and hoist the French flag. 2. Every village rising against the French shall be burnt down. 3. Every village that submits should hoist the French flag. 4. The sheikh of each village should seal all property, houses, and possessions belonging to the Mamluks. And 5. The scholars must remain at their posts. Prayers shall be performed as customary, and may God perpetuate the glory of the Ottoman Sultan and the French army, and may he curse the Mamluks and adjust the condition of the Egyptians. Al-Jabarti, the contemporary who recorded all of these events, dissected the flyer and noted its gross grammatical errors and ridiculous religious claims. He frequently recorded the behaviors of the French and voiced his opinion on them. "Whenever a Frenchman has to perform an act of nature, he does so wherever he happens to be, even in the full view of people, and he goes away as he is, without washing his private parts after defecation. If he is a man of taste and refinement, he wipes himself with whatever he finds, even with a paper with writing on it. Otherwise, he remains as he is. They have intercourse with any woman who pleases them and vice versa. Sometimes, one of their women go into barber shops and ask them to shave their pubic hair, and if the barber wishes, he can take his fee in kind. Napoleon's armies set out from Rosetta and continued their march south along the Nile, with the obvious aim of conquering the Egyptian capital. They occupied the settlements of Fu'a and Al-Rahmaniyya until they encountered the forces of Murad Bey awaiting them. However, the Egyptians were not able to hold their ground and were quickly routed. Both sides suffered minimal casualties from this short battle, but the Egyptians had much of their arsenal and artillery pieces destroyed. The French march continued on, and it was only a matter of time until they would reach Cairo. Fortifications along the road were ordered, but they were of no help. After some days had passed since his defeat, Murad Bey went to the village of Mbabe, located near the pyramids of Giza, to set up defenses for the imminent French attack on Cairo, and issued a call to arms. Ibrahim stationed his forces on the other side of the riverbank. Al-Jabarti's critical accounts give us a good insight of these events. For the Mamluks, he said, "The Mamluks gathered on the two banks, but they were irresolute and were at odds with one another, being divided in opinion, envious of each other, frightened for their lives, their well-being and comforts, immersed in their ignorance and self-delusion, arrogant and haughty in their attire and presumptuousness, afraid of decreasing in number and pompous in their finery, heedless of the results of their actions." And although he was often highly critical of the French, he did give credit where it's due and praised the French for their determination and courage. They were unlike the other group. They acted as if they were following the tradition of the Islamic nation in the early days of Islam and saw themselves as fighters in a holy war. They never considered the number of their enemy too high, nor did they care who among them was killed. Indeed, they considered anyone who fled a traitor to his community and an apostate to his faith and creed. They followed the orders of their commanders and faithfully obeyed their leader. The Battle of the Pyramids ended with a French victory, and Cairo was laid open to the French. Murad Bey and others retreated. What followed was the devastating looting of Cairo, which Al-Jabarti would describe as events that had never happened before in Cairo's history. Later, however, Napoleon promised the locals safe conduct, after the local scholars pleaded with the French. Meanwhile, Admiral Nelson discovered the French fleet of Aboukir and proceeded to destroy most of the ships. The French were stuck in Egypt. Upon hearing the news, Napoleon said, "We no longer have a navy. Well, we'll have to stay here or leave as great men, just as the ancients did." News had also arrived of Murad Bey and his forces being spotted southwest of Cairo. The French had marched out to engage. However, this time, the Mamluks were a bit more aware of their disadvantages. After some initial exchange of fire, the Mamluks performed a feigned retreat and lured the French into an ambush set at Mount Al-Lahoun. The Mamluks defeated the French at Al-Lahoun, and news of this victory spread quickly, giving hope to the Egyptians. The following month, more minor skirmishes had taken place with Murad Bey against the French, which resulted in more French defeats. Meanwhile, in Cairo, the population started becoming more aware of French mismanagement of the city, especially with the manipulation of the tax laws. A revolt was brewing, encouraged by the local scholars. "O Muslims, jihad is incumbent upon you. How can you free men agree to pay jizya to the unbelievers? Have you no pride? Has not the call reached you?" The great revolt of Cairo had begun. The population had come out in the streets bearing arms to expel the French from their homes. Crowds gathered at the Al-Husseiniya Mosque and Al-Azhar, where one of the French generals was killed. Heavy skirmishes occurred in the streets between the locals who had barricaded themselves behind the stone walls. However, as soon as the French lined up their cannons against the city, all hell broke loose. The French opened fire upon the city indiscriminately, killing and destroying whatever they hit. The rebels quickly fled and went into hiding. Napoleon ordered the cannons to be fired at the Al-Azhar Mosque, where many people were hiding. The Great Revolt ended in a massacre, with thousands of locals being killed. The little trust that was established between the French and Egyptians was broken. The scholars, in an attempt to avoid more bloodshed, warned the Muslims against further agitation. Months later, Napoleon continued towards Syria, and Sultan Selim III had enough of the French and declared war with the help of the British. Napoleon pushed through Palestine and occupied the cities of Gaza, Jaffa, and Haifa, eventually reaching the city of Acre and besieging it. This would be Napoleon's first major setback in his Egyptian campaign. He was unable to take over Acre after 2 months and retreated back to Egypt. The Ottoman fleet had arrived in Alexandria, while Murad Bey still posed a threat in the south. Napoleon fled to Abu Qir, where an Ottoman force was awaiting him, but emerged victorious. With the constant losses he was facing in his army, and the political instability emerging back in France, Napoleon secretly departed Egypt after over a year, with informing a select few, and had informed General Kleber he would take the command in Egypt in the form of a letter the same day he had left. The French who stayed in Egypt viewed this as nothing short of a betrayal. Kleber would command the French in Egypt until his assassination in 1800, and the French as a whole would be defeated in 1801, and Egypt would return back to the Ottomans. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting the channel via the links provided in the description. We are working hard to deliver consistent, high-quality content on Islamic history, so make sure to subscribe to stay updated. Thank you for watching. Akhlaq and Izzah.